The Virginia Horse Industry Board and the Virginia Christmas Tree Growers Association are proud sponsors of Virginia Farming.
This program's brought to you by the Virginia Farm Bureau. Large or small, Virginia farmers work year-round to help put food on your table. And Farm Bureau works year-round to help farmers and all Virginians. Farming, it's all good. To learn more, go to vafarmbureau.org.
Hi everybody, welcome to Virginia Farming. I'm Amy Rocher. This week, we're tackling a highly debated topic, GMOs. Now, in order to avoid any political spin, we're getting the scientific viewpoint from Virginia's corn and small grain specialist, Dr. Wade Thomason. Then, Mark Viette shares tips on growing fragrant plants indoors when we go in the garden. And we'll also have a Minute in the Field video. That's all coming up on this edition of Virginia Farming. Today we're tackling the issue of GMOs. It's a hot topic and there's a lot of controversy all over the United States about them. I'm joined by Wade Thomason. He's the Virginia Small Grains and Corn Specialist. Thank you so much for being here today. Hoping you can shed some light on this topic without putting a political spin on it, as sometimes we are so used to hearing in social media. Let's start off with the basic question, what is a GMO?
It is in this case we're specifically talking about plants, but it's an organism that has had DNA from a different organism introduced into its cellular makeup. So a piece of DNA from here inserted into here that the plant then takes and makes as a part of its own.
And what's the purpose for that?
Well, typically when it's done, it's to induce the plant to produce something that it normally wouldn't, that we want it to. For example, to be tolerant of herbicides or to repel pests, produce its own toxins.
Okay. So what's the difference between genetically modified and hybridization?
So I think there are three things that we sort of need to cover there. One is our traditional plant breeding approach, which is you combine the positive attributes of two closely related individuals. And then over time, you maybe 5-6 generations, you improve the genetic productivity, so the desirable traits. That's our traditional plant breeding approach. Hybridization and production of hybrid seed is a little bit different in that you are still making that cross, that pollination. But what you ultimately are crossing are two related but distantly related individuals, and what you get then is a term called hybrid vigor, which means that the offspring are typically more productive, maybe bigger plants, maybe more productive in that manner. Genetic modification involves really taking a strip of DNA or a segment of DNA from another organism and inserting it into the plant with the purpose of incorporating that DNA, making that DNA functional in whatever mechanism in that new plant. So you have the first two methods involve species, same genus, same species. The other involves introduction of DNA from a totally different organism.
So do we have corn, and I'm talking about, well, it's going to be human consumption one way or the other, whether it's feed corn for cattle or sweet corn for humans. Do we have corn that is grown both ways through hybridization and from GMOs? What's the difference?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So corn is the classic example of hybrid seed in that we get a lot of vigor from that original wide cross in that first generation, but if you save the seed from that, the next generation is fairly poor, and that's because it begins to segregate again. GMO is, again, it's a different approach and a different incorporation. And yes, we have both. We have hybrid seed corn that is GMO and non-GMO. We also have some open pollinated corn, although that's not typically grown in most places. Almost all of the field corn that we grow in the U.S. is GMO, 85 or so percentage. There is some GM sweet corn out there, but it's a much lower proportion.
Okay. How long have GMOs been around?
Since the mid-90s, since about 1996 in the corn and soybean world, the majority of the corn, soybean, and cotton we grow in this country is GMO crops.
I guess one question I have is, how did we get to this? Why are we genetically modifying crops?
The need exists for more food for the people in the world. We also need to be more efficient and more profitable in these farm businesses. And most of the GM traits that we have been introduced today have been effective at that. They help preserve against pests. They make production less expensive in many cases. And oftentimes they make that production simpler for the farmer, especially in terms of herbicide traits or insect scouting or those sorts of things. So it's about making the overall system more productive.
You mentioned needing to create more food, and the United Nations says that with the world population growing, we're going to need to double our food supply by the year 2050. Mm-hmm. Do GMOs play into that? Or do they play a significant role?
Absolutely, they can. Our traits today are those that make crop production more efficient and reduce pest losses. The next generations of traits are going to be probably more specific to abiotic stresses like drought and heat. They're also going to be, in some cases, geared towards specific improvements in nutritional quality for these crops. So going forward, we need intensive production. We need to be able to produce as much as we can on the land that's existing, and we need to improve the utilization of what we are growing.
I always laugh when I hear that. It kind of blows my mind, because we've come so far as how many people one farmer can feed. But there are so many hours in a day, and our farmers are already working well into the night when it comes to harvest time. Is this a good solution?
Very much so. There was an article in The Economist magazine several years ago about an explanation of the difference in wheat yields at the Rothamsted experiment station in England. The difference between 1 ton versus 10 tons to the hectare. And their analogy was that 1 ton yield is similar to what subsistence farmers get in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. And that's the same yield that they get in England, in a very high producing environment, an area that has very high yields with no technology applied to it. And so we need the very best science, we need the very best technology at our fingertips and for our farmers in order to be able to meet that challenge.
And do you feel like there are really good things on the horizon to help our farmers meet that challenge?
I absolutely hope so. There are some very smart people working in lots of different areas in terms of managing different amounts of stress, managing pests, making products that have fewer post-harvest losses. So I think all of these things are going to be important to meeting this future food demand.
It's gotten to be a very politicized topic with social media, and we hear outcries all the time for GMO, for and against.
Right.
I want you to try to help us understand what happens in a GM plant and how it can either A, be harmful, or B, not be harmful to us by the time we would consume either the beef cow that's eaten it or the sweet corn that we've just put butter on. Okay.
Well, I think one of the common misconceptions is that these plants appear to be different, and they don't. There could be a field of GMO soybean next to a field of non-GMO soybean, and you can't tell any difference. Phenotypically, there's no way to tell. The plants look exactly the same. It's one small change in one small piece of DNA that this plant has that this plant doesn't. The GM events themselves are tailored to be very specific in terms of herbicide resistance or tolerance to a very specific pest, or something like that. So when you take something like BT corn, for example, the toxin that the plant produces is very specific to one type of foliar feeding and caterpillar. And there's a few other nuances there, but typically that's what we're talking about. And so it's that specific protein, that specific caterpillar. And so when you take it to the next step, most of that protein and most of that toxin is concentrated in the plant parts, not the grain. And so you have a reduction in terms of, or very little toxin produced in the grain. Then you're taking that and you're feeding it to a chicken or a pig or a cow for further processing to turn into meat or milk or other products. So you ultimately have a dilution compared to the toxin production at the plant leaf level.
Okay. So most of the toxins stay in the plant part, but we eat the seed part for the most part, for the bloom.
So that's one of the things that I think has been a safety, something that the government has taken a very risk-averse approach to. So we see some of these events in some field crops like corn, cotton, and soybeans. We haven't seen them in some of the foods that we would directly consume. It's probably not so much a factor of whether or not they're really dangerous, but it's a fact of making sure that we're taking very, very few risks with these sorts of things.
So we read sometimes that seed companies are putting pesticides and herbicides directly into the seeds. How can that not be harmful for human consumption?
Well, that's a good question. And it's a little bit of a nuanced answer in that they are inserting DNA from organisms that would then make the plant produce a toxin. For example, as we talked about with BT corn, but the toxin is very specific to that one type of caterpillar. So other organisms that are in the field, whether they're beetles or bugs or people, aren't affected by it. It doesn't have an impact on them. And so when you get to the assessment of is this dangerous? Well, it's very dangerous for the caterpillar feeding on that particular leaf. For those of us that would be eating chicken that were fed that corn, there's very little risk of that toxin affecting us at all.
I mean, in your opinion, with your background, do you feel like GMOs are really, blown out of proportion?
Let me put it to you this way. The preponderance of the scientific work says that GMOs are safe and effective. There's the USDA and other agencies that regulate them, USDA and FDA in terms of crop production and food, have deemed them no different from the non-GMO counterparts in those same crops. We've been in this country consuming these products, GM-based products, for over 20 years. And while there are changes, obviously, in the health levels and different diseases in the population, I don't know of anything that's proven a direct correlation between the introduction of these traits and any negative health effects. It's just not been demonstrated in the preponderance of our research.
I always wonder, when they bring new drugs on the market and they say it's great for this, and it gets approved, and then 20 years down the road, we're seeing a lot of side effects that it's caused. And I always wonder if we're going to see the same from GM plants.
That's always an important question to ask. The way I'd answer that is that we as scientists can't demonstrate something as 100% forevermore safe. What we can do is give an assessment of potential risk. And in this case, the potential negative health, any negative health effects are very, very low.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good to know, because I think genetically modified substances are in just about everything. What are some of the foods that we eat on an everyday basis that we might not even be aware? And not everything is marked.
Right. Well, anything that has products from corn, basically, products from soy, or products from cottonseed oil, and a lot of things that are labeled that are sold as vegetable oil have a significant portion of cottonseed oil in them. all those, you can fairly safely assume that they were, at least a portion of that were GM crops. I would guess, and I've read some places that maybe 80% of what we eat is affected by GMO crops, so has a contribution from GM crops.
We're probably eating it all the time and really don't know it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you didn't ask this question directly, but there's been a lot of interest and a lot of discussion about GMO labeling. I think in many aspects, what I've just talked about is the problem or the concern that most of us that are in the industry would have with that, is that because the majority of crops that we grow, field crops that we grow, are GM, and because we don't have the segregation and tracking system within the grains industry that we might have, say, in the fresh vegetable industry, it's going to be almost impossible to differentiate those that have some GMO crop in them and those that don't. So basically what I feel like if we have labeling, what we're going to have is like your package of grapes that says product of the United States, Chile, Mexico, Honduras, or Nicaragua. So everything is going to
cover all the bases.
Everything is going to have to default to may contain GM crops.
Right.
Or almost everything.
I had a viewer ask about GM plants and no-till farming. Mm-hmm. Are GM plants necessary when you do the no-till type of farming?
No, it's not essential. However, one of the things that makes no-till farming easier and more successful is the potential to use GM crops that are tolerant to specific herbicides, specific broad spectrum herbicides that allow us to take all of the weeds out with a single application of one active ingredient. So it can make that easier, but it's certainly not a requirement.
So you mentioned the food labeling a little bit. Another labeling issue comes with organics. Mm-hmm. Where do GMOs fit into the organic system? What's the difference?
Well, it's important for people to understand that they are absolutely different. One is a type of seed, a type of plant. The other is a production system. And just like we talked about earlier, where it's not essential to have GMO seeds for no-till production. You can have, you could use an organic production system with any type of seed, whether it's non-GMO or GMO. Now that may get into some labeling issues there, but there's no exclusivity between the two things in terms of a production system. So, and that's often a point of confusion.
So I could go pull something off the shelf that says it's organic and could still contain a GMO plant?
So probably not. Probably not. Although there would be no reason and that'd be because of a labeling issue.
Okay.
But there would be no reason why you couldn't take a GMO seed, put it under all, and use it under all organic production systems. There's no difference in terms of that seed source and then the production scheme that you use.
Wade, where would you suggest our viewers go so they can get some information and further educate themselves and help them make reliable decisions?
So I always advise people that the best sources of information for these sorts of topics are typically the USDA and the FDA. I mean, those are the organizations that regulate these products either as crops or assess them as food. And so I guess I would encourage people to look to experts in this area who also have the credibility and the assignment to assess this and test the safety of these products.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us out here today. It's been an eye-opener, and we really appreciate the education you've provided for us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Fragrant plants like jasmine, gardenias, and even lemons can be grown indoors throughout the year, and it may be easier than you think. With tips, here's Mark Viette.
There are a lot of fragrant plants that you can grow indoors, especially during the winter months, even in spring and in summer. Keep in mind, a lot of the plants that really have great fragrance do like bright light, higher humidity, and to be kept somewhat moist, like this great jasmine. Wow, this is really powerful. Gardenias also have a lot of fragrance that'll fill the whole room, but they also like bright light, high humidity, and moist soils, maybe even acidic soils on gardenias. But if you're really looking for that plant that gives a real powerful, wonderful fragrance, think about Stephanotis. Same conditions, bright light, humidity, and moist soils, and this would probably fill your whole home with that great fragrance. Now, these fragrances are not as overpowering or as obnoxious as like paper white tulips. These really are a little more delicate, but keep in mind there are different bulbs that you can plant for indoor use, and one of them might be some of your daffodils or narcissus, and then you also have your hyacinths, which you can grow indoors, and then eventually both these can be planted outdoors in the garden during the early spring. In a minute, we're going to talk about citrus indoors, which is one of my favorite plants. Do you want to grow something that George Washington grew? You might consider citrus. Citrus are easy to grow. They just need to be kept in areas that really don't freeze. So during the winter, you can put them outdoors in like a warm building, or you can keep them in your basement, or you can keep them in your sunroom. The great thing about citrus is, after being grown outdoors during the summer months, and when you bring them in, they begin to bloom. And the blooms are very fragrant. On top of that, you can grow your very own lemons. So once they finish flowering, they produce lemons like this. Now, I will tell you, if you want to grow something like grapefruit, they're really hard. But the limes and the lemons are easy to grow. And if you think these plants are big, there's one plant that's a lot bigger than these that I'll show you. If you've got that sunroom or garden room, this is a variegated citrus. It's known as the pink lemon. And if you look right down here, you can see it's producing great fruit. Easy to grow. I'm Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.
That does it for our show. Thanks so much for watching and have a great week. I'm Amy Rocher for Virginia Farming.
This program is brought to you by the Virginia Farm Bureau. From apples to zucchini, Virginia farmers work hard to put food on your table. And Farm Bureau works year-round to help farmers and all Virginians. Farming, it's all good. To learn more, go to vafarmbureau.org.
Check out Virginia Farming on Facebook. Virginia Farming's Facebook page is a great way to stay connected with Virginia agriculture. You might even find some humor there too. You'll find links to events and happenings all over the Commonwealth that are of interest to farmers and consumers alike. So connect with us and share your stories and photos with the Virginia farming community and keep up to date on all things agriculture. Virginia Farming on Facebook.